All right. I hope you guys are ready. We got a security based theme today with this podcast. We got Atlas on from Printer Financial. Atlas, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Just give a brief overview of who you are, what you do at Printer, and then we'll get started on really digging deep into security and everything you got to bring.
Yeah, awesome. First off, thanks for having me here. So really excited to do this talk. Security is something that really interests me, as it should everybody in this space. So my experience is mainly in everything throughout a couple decades. So development, DevOps, security, even got into agile coaching, mostly in an enterprise environment. So yeah, dabbled in everything except for front end. That's my Achilles heel. But yeah, I like to think that I'm pretty well rounded elsewhere. Security is definitely one of the more favorite topics in a in my past, but um, yeah, that's I actually truly believe everything starts with security. So yeah, happy to do this talk.
Awesome. Yeah, and I have to completely agree on the whole security bit. I think a lot of people are waiting until DeFi, crypto, everything in between start to become a little more secure before putting their funds into it. I mean, it's really crazy thing thinking that you could put your money into a project, they could have a great use case, at least explain it on paper, and to have that money just disappear overnight. So I do think a lot of people are waiting for that, especially if you have a good amount of money, you're not going to put uh, an obscene amount of it into something that could potentially disappear overnight. It's just not, that risk to reward is just not there. So yeah, if you want to get started on the whole security bit, I know that you guys kind of had an interesting way of looking at it, as far as how to develop some kind of bridge. What was um, the initial problem with security as you enter the crypto space that you saw? Just trying to lead into your background.
So with bridges specifically, what we see and we still see today every so often is liquidity hacks on the bridge. So the way that a lot of these bridges work now, you have to stake liquidity on both sides, and those liquidity pools are what the bridge uses to lock and unlock funds. So for instance, if you want to take Ethereum off onto Phantom, you're basically wrapping Ethereum on the Ethereum bridge, and then getting a a token that represents that wrapped Ethereum on Phantom. So with all this wrapped liquidity sitting around, it's a really big target for attacks like we have seen. So I mean, billions of dollars stolen in liquidity draining. So when we built Printer, what one of the core things was reducing the attack vector. So in our case, we actually don't wrap any liquidity, so there's nothing there to
Hmm.
steal in that case. But but
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest things when building out our solution was security, not only with liquidity hacks, but also with different projects that host, and that's where the trustless bridging as a service fits in, where other projects can have their own bridge without trusting the main bridge. So if you were on a traditional bridge and you wanted to bridge your token through a solution, if they offered one, you would be at mercy of that bridge. So you not only have to trust all of the underlying technology of blockchain, smart contracts, your own code, but then you also have to trust all of the code of the bridge as well. So it kind of increases the attack vectors, it increases the space for things to go wrong. And we tried to slim it down as much as possible, which is good in any form of development. You always want to do as little as possible to get the job done, as simple as possible, because that tends to be more secure because it's more visible
Hmm.
what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's kind of like those sayings, like laws are created only so that you can find the loopholes to get around them. The more specific you are, the more loopholes there are. So that broad overview, the simpler, the better, is probably it makes a lot of sense. At least coming from me, I don't have a lot of dev experience at all, but um, definitely resonates with me. Um, Kind of getting into that big picture. Um, Firstly, like, what is a smart contract? How does that relate to security? How do they play with each other? Because when you do have a bridge, obviously, like you said, you're going to have issues um, with more attack vectors is what you call them, which I've heard that only used once before, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of points that can be hacked or taken advantage of. Correct.
Exactly. Yeah. So you limit the things that could go wrong.
Hmm.
Therefore, you limit things that do go wrong.
Yes, exactly. That makes sense. And so, kind of getting into that, what is a smart contract and how do they interplay with each other? For anyone that doesn't know even the basics of what a smart contract is, but how do they interplay within each other when you're dealing with two separate entities, for example?
Yeah. So smart contracts, from a very basic level, I think people are familiar interfacing with those on dApps. But underneath there, at its basic core, it's just programming code that runs inside of the blockchain in a deterministic way. So when people think of ERC20 tokens, those are literally smart contracts. And the smart contract's job is to keep track of what wallets own what allocations of tokens and facilitate the transfer between them. Uh, so with that being said, smart contracts are secure only as secure as they are, as you think they are today. So, and what I mean by that is there could always be vulnerabilities that people don't see, even in existing smart contracts that seem to be safe. So what Solidity developers try to do is they try to use libraries that have been used many times in the past. So you could think of programming smart contracts as utilizing these libraries and also adding some custom functionality to them where needed, where you have to go off script to uh, basically just interact with different actions on the chain, whether it be staking pools or flash loans or even the DEX.
Hmm.
All of these are just code that's being ran on the blockchain that when it's ran, the output is always the same, and
Hmm.
that's the basics of a contract.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So it does, and I think we all have interacted with it once or twice at the very minimum if we're here. And so
Yeah.
it is interesting kind of hearing about that. I mean, we're only interacting with the front end of, what we see and what is on, the dApp. Do you mind digging a little bit deeper into kind of how that integrates with the back end of things, looking at it from a developer standpoint and seeing how the smart contracts, how they interact with each other and exactly, so like more of that deeper detailed dive into it.
Yeah, so as a complete picture, that also opens up more potential attack
Hmm.
vectors where we've seen some issues lately. When you interface with a dApp, you're normally using a web application front end. And what the front end does is it crafts specific calls to smart contracts. So it calls functions inside of these contracts with certain parameters. So in the case of a bridge, it's going to send, for instance, what token are you bridging? How many are you bridging? Maybe some options on slippage and different things. The front end web application crafts that and then submits that to the blockchain. And the smart contract's going to pick up on that. Now, when you talk about interactions with different contracts, a lot of times contracts are modularized. That helps with upgrades. It helps with separation of duties, and it could also help with some gas optimization. But that function from the web side, we'll call one or more functions inside of the Solidity, and there we run into two common attack vectors. One being reentry, where you could, if depending on how the interaction of the smart contract chain is designed, you can create basically loops to have it create actions that were unintended. For instance, drain all the tokens out of an account in a loop before the tokens are actually deducted at the end, which would allow you to
Hmm.
steal all of the funds in the contract. The other end is on the user facing end, where we've seen some DEX websites lately that were completely hacked,
Hmm.
and a new front end was applied on top that interfaced with a different smart contract. So both of those are potential vulnerabilities. Um, with my project, specifically printer, we actually statically host the web, so there's
Hmm.
no server behind the scenes. It makes it less likely to get hacked.
Hmm.
And for the reentry, we try to keep the bridging as simple as possible. So, we're not trying to jump through hoops in order to make something more flexible than it needs to be. We're trying to do one thing and doing it well. So, but we do see that the more complex that a project gets, the more potential for hacks on the smart contract level. And most projects have potential issues with the front end. I mean, if the front end is hacked, then there's not much you can do. So it's always wise to double check your transactions in your wallet before submitting it. Make sure the contracts didn't change. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, staying disciplined like that is the best way to prevent getting caught up in a website hack.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a very interesting point you kind of bring up because you don't really think about how it happens on the back end. It can look the exact same on, approving a transaction on your MetaMask, but if the back end of what, that approve button is actually doing is different, you could, like you said, be draining your entire wallet before, you see any difference. So it's an extremely interesting piece.
And at the same time, you should regularly be going through your authorizations and revoking things that you do not use. Because at any
Hmm.
point in time, there could be a vulnerability discovered in one of those other protocols that could potentially put your funds at risk.
Are you referencing like connected sites and that kind of thing?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And when you
Awesome.
do more specifically token approvals.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. So kind of branching from that, getting into some main ideas because I know Cleatosaurus put together a couple different points that you were seemed very eager to kind of talk about today. Um, if you were to put on the hacker's hat, as he referenced it, I'm not sure if you're the one that told him to say that, but I thought it was kind of funny. But if you were to put on the hacker's hat, um, how would you go about hacking into a protocol? How would you go about hacking into a bridge? Kind of like down the list, or whether it be the back end or the front end.
Yeah, so no, I didn't come up with those.
Okay.
um, yeah, so on that question specifically, like I don't really think it's appropriate to really go a deep dive
Hmm.
into specifics there, but from a higher level,
Yeah.
security is all about layers of protection. And what I like to call the big S system. So it's a collection of little components that work together in such a way to in a system to provide the intention of the developers.
Hmm.
So when you want to find a vulnerability in a system, what you first have to do is take a look at the entire system, see how things are interacting with each other. Then you can dive into the components and find if you can, you know, make them act in a way that maybe was not intended, which would give you some sort of advantage somewhere else. And that's the gist of it. But for instance, if we have a complete DApp that is a bridge, for example, and an attacker wants to steal funds, well, they would look for weak points in that system, and like we mentioned before, replacing contract addresses on a hacked front end is an easy way to do that. We've also seen hacks on RPCs themselves lately. So that's another attack on a component that could allow you to do things that you normally should not be able to do in the big S system. So it's all about looking at all the components, and security is about putting up as many barriers as you can.
Hmm. Definitely understandable. And I kind of branching from that, then would you mind explaining what exactly is kind of going on? How would a hack actually take place? Like if it's a smart contract, if it's not something that can be modified, um, would it have to be like a specific person's wallet getting hacked, like a multi-sig wallet getting hacked, or would it like how would the whole back end side of that thing actually happen? Um, where are those attack vectors actually presenting these opportunities for? Is I guess what I'm uh, asking. How does someone get access to those attack vectors, and how do we monitor, or as an individual, how do we try and avoid those from affecting us?
Yeah, so another again a good example is the front end hacks. So in order to hack the front end, there's a couple attack vectors that stand out. One is a vulnerable web server itself. So you could just replace code at will if you attack the actual web server, and also DNS hijacking. So if you're able to hijack a DNS address by DNS that's maybe not correctly configured, or even a social engineering hack on the domain registrar, so that you could direct traffic to a server you own. You don't necessarily have to hack the server that is real. You could just direct traffic at will. Um, by doing either of those, what the hack does is it replaces contract addresses to a malicious contract. Thereby, the attacker can do whatever they want. And the only way that a user could really protect themselves by that is adding to their wallet. You can add labels to contract addresses. So you should add labels to known contract addresses to help you verify when you're actually signing a transaction that you're signing it with the correct contract. If you don't look at the contract, you can very easily be submitting to a hacked contract.
Interesting. So I didn't even realize that you could give specific contracts names. I figured that was just with whatever site that you would be using. It's kind of interesting.
And that's an easy way to remember. If you see
Yeah.
something new, then that's an alarm bell. And it's all
Yes.
about adding layers. That's just one more layer to your security, checking your contract addresses.
Yes.
It's a pain in the ass, but it's well worth it. So
Yeah, there's a variety of different things, if you're dealing with just trading in the on the conventional, traditional finance marketplace, you're going to be much more secure just from all these hacks and things like that, because there is that extra layer. You're dealing with that centralized aspect. I think decentralization uh, has yet to develop that security around it to be extremely enticing to those investors that I was speaking about earlier. So uh, I really
and
enjoy, hearing about some of these security aspects. Um,
I think it's when you talk about security and decentralization,
mhm,
you're really decentralizing the security as well.
mhm,
So that's something that you get a lot of good, but you also get a lot of difficult out
yeah,
of decentralization, and
mhm,
that's just all part of the nature of it.
yeah, 100%. Definitely makes sense. Kind of branching from these hackers stealing funds and things like that. Um, since the blockchain is so transparent, do you have any kind of idea as to um, why funds and that sort of thing are unable to be recovered after something like that? Or does it just have to be with the nature of everything, it being very difficult to blacklist a wallet, or along those lines? Why is it so difficult for funds to be recovered, not tracked down? I guess it's more along
Yeah,
the
so
lines that I'm asking.
there's there's many reasons. So yes, everything is visible on the blockchain, but then you have things called tumblers, which try to obfuscate those transactions to a greater or lesser extent.
Mhm,
So it's a way of laundering funds. But not only that, even if you know the whole trace of it, it is decentralized and it is
mhm,
global. So now we're talking about jurisdictional issues.
mhm,
So you can't, even if you know who stole funds, you can't necessarily enforce the recovery of the funds.
mhm,
And a big name that comes up is North Korea, for instance. North Korea makes a significant amount of their budget based on ransomware and crypto crime. So if North Korea is the recipient of these funds, they have their networks in place that are out of the reach of any jurisdiction
mhm,
to actually recover those funds. Now, blacklisting only works so far, and that works on the service level provider
mhm,
level. MetaMask can, for instance, block certain addresses on a blacklist, but anybody's free to then fork the MetaMask code and remove those
mhm.
blocks. So it's very, very difficult. on blockchain
Hmm.
to undo anything legal or illegal.
Yeah, very interesting. And that's a point that I hadn't really thought about. The jurisdiction is of these, where these funds are actually um, getting converted into hard cash, and that's a very interesting point. Branching now from the side of how hackers are actually doing this, um, going into that more of position that we'd be in as individuals trying to be a little bit more secure, or a project in that same position. What can projects kind of do to defend against some of these hacks, from whether it be on the back end, like you mentioned that a lot of these hacks are on the back end, where users are then going to interact with that fake or changed contract. Um, what can projects do to eliminate the or bring down those odds of something like that happening?
So the first rule is security is hard. So what I mean by that is if you don't know what you're doing, make sure somebody looks at it that does. Get the
Mhm,
help required because you don't know what you don't know. And part of that same spirit is use libraries that are known, like Open Zeppelin, for instance. There's been so many eyes, so many audits, and that code is provided as little cookie cutter drops for common actions, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Anytime you reinvent the wheel, you're creating issues for yourself. So security is hard. Rely on what has been done, and rely on the more eyes, the better.
mhm,
Also audits. So audits are important, but I personally think that they're a little overstated and a little heavy on the marketing side. So not all audits are created equal.
mhm.
I would say if you want to be sure, audit your auditing company. See how many protocols they've audited that ended up being hacked, or
Mhm,
what their track record is, and I think you'll be surprised. So don't if you want to be secure, don't look at bargain pricing. Look at the audit of the auditor. And the same for users. If you want to check to see if an auditor is good, that it was used at a project that you're looking at, find out some information on that auditor. Don't just look at the badge and say audit's good and continue on.
mhm. I also found some very interesting things up, like about audits in general. If anyone isn't aware, uh, audits a lot of times will catch a lot of things, but you can still pass an audit with having a certain amount of yellow flags, for example, which are potential. I don't know if I would call it necessarily an attack vector, but potential risks and places where this contract can be used in a malicious way. It's possible that it is, but a lot of these functionalities that projects require in order to continue to build require some of these flags to be present. So just looking at that stamp really doesn't necessarily mean a lot. It's a lot of times a lot more beneficial to look into the actual report itself and find out for yourself whether you may trust the team or not enough to have those potential capabilities, or you want to wait until some future information comes out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then
Um,
also multiple audits don't hurt.
mhm.
So if you're audited by multiple companies, one company could miss something where another one catches something.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's a big piece. I mean, it goes into everything. Just the more people looking at something you're doing, the more errors that can be actually caught. Kind of looking at the back end of that, even if um a code is audited, do most audits that you know of look into the security vulnerabilities um from outside sources, like very very in depth, or is a lot of the audit looking into whether intended functionalities are working correctly?
Well, so it all depends on the quality of the auditing company. If you're with a company that's of high quality, they're going to look at all the code. They're going to look at the what you call static analysis of the code.
Hmm.
So throwing these warnings and different items. But they're also going to look at the like I mentioned before, the big S of the system, and look at it from an attacker's standpoint, and try to see if they can find things that could be potential vectors that may need to be looked at. Actually run the code and play with it and try to break it. But then you have other auditing companies that basically run the static analysis and may try to deploy code, maybe not, um, but but
Mhm.
it's two completely different levels of auditing, which is why it's so important to understand the quality of the audit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people are starting it's starting to become a recurring theme. I think a couple months ago the recurring theme was on KYCs and that not all KYCs are the same, and now it's starting to change into a little bit more of that audit side of things. So it's you have a very interesting perspective on that. And I really appreciate that. Um Looking at a little bit more project specific now, you happen to be the founder of a bridging protocol. How is the printer financial bridge safer than the rest of bridges? And what are you guys kind of doing to uh, navigate a lot of the waters that you've been speaking about?
Yeah, so again, it all starts at limiting the attack vectors. So for instance, we don't use any sort of wrapped liquidity. So there's nothing to drain there. We keep our contracts extremely slim, extremely small, and don't rely on interactions between contracts, so that we can keep things way more simple to understand,
Hmm.
and therefore less attack vectors again. But another thing that we added, and I believe we're unique anywhere on this, is the trustless bridging as a service, which
Hmm.
allows us to provide the same level of service of our bridge. So the exact same functionality of our bridge, to any project. They basically own it, but they never give up or they never add trust or anything to the bridge itself. So they're always 100% in control of everything. Therefore, if for instance, a hack does happen on the bridge, the protocol is still safe. A hack would have to happen on the bridge, or I mean, and the protocol, or just the protocol itself. But what that does is it doesn't add another attack vector to the protocol by using this solution, because they're never giving up their trust in the first place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Can you explain a little bit more to like the common person like myself? Um, because I hear what you're saying. I like if I were to um go a little bit deeper in some of these common understandings that I have. How would you kind of explain how this actual interaction is preventing any kind of issue? Like let's say your bridge does get hacked. Um, in common terms, how would I kind of be able to understand what that means? Like in the way that you guys are trustless, because I understand that the
Yeah. So
protocol. Sorry, go on.
oh yeah. So at the basis, at the core of the bridge, we're really an information bridge. So we're not
Hmm.
a token bridge or an NFT bridge. We're an information bridge, which allows us to bridge tokens, NFTs, and any sort of data, any sort of actions across chain. And the way that we engineered the trustless part of this is we act as the facilitator of all of these messaging channels, through all of our contracts, through all of our rule sets, our protections on the bridge side. But every signal is then double verified. So you never gave up trust to the bridge in the first place. So your contracts are the actors with your project still, but your contracts also get a chance to verify that this is a truth from the bridge. So even if the bridge got hacked and tried to lie to you as a protocol, it would be rejected. So there's that trust built in where you've never given up the trust, and you distrust the bridge by default, which I'm a big fan of
Hmm.
block first, allow later,
Hmm.
and that kind of encompasses that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And so, kind of with everything, I assume that the more people that have access, to open doors into the bridge to edit code or whatever it is, change how things work is, those are more possible attack vectors. With that, are you guys doing anything to control how often things get changed, or if things can't even get changed once everything is ready to go with a specific protocol, or that kind of thing?
Yes, the protocols are actually free to change anything they want at any time. Of course, we give them support. helping them with changes they want to make, or even
Hmm.
double checking changes that they did make. Uh, but but really, it's we provide the core code that's been ran by us, and that we've been using, um, and we're pretty confident that it's good code. At least we try to make it the best it can be. But you are free as a protocol to make any sort of changes that you want, and we don't control that,
Gotcha.
and I don't think we should control that.
I guess I'm more speaking to the actual contracts for the bridge itself. Whether those
So
are, sorry, go on.
yeah, so those are just the basic infrastructure, which is not changing dependent on the projects.
Okay.
So that is what it is. Uh,
Gotcha.
um, I mean, maybe there could be upgrades in the future, but when we add on new protocols, new features, it doesn't really require changing of the contracts because it was engineered to be a generic messaging bridge from the start. So we
Hmm.
can add functionality outside of changes to the contract.
Gotcha. Definitely makes sense. And I bet that's helpful with again limiting those potential attacks, correct? Because the more options you give in order to change something or move something around, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would make sense that that would allow more opportunities for someone to come in from.
And not only that, but it would give the development team more opportunities to make mistakes. So you have to
Hmm.
keep into account both of those. So keeping things simple is best on development, maintenance, and outside vulnerabilities.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you. Even looking at it from any other's perspective, like even if you're not even talking about developing, a smart contract or anything of the sort, even when looking at business, for example, a lot of times keeping things simple, very direct, have a clear, concise goal is going to be much more effective in whatever you're doing than trying to make things extremely complex and trying to adhere to that. Just in general, a lot more
Yeah.
air gets introduced into those things. Uh, I really appreciate that response. With all this, uh, because there isn't exactly a way outside the at least that you mentioned a lot of audits. Um, what is a way that a project can really make sure that they're properly protected? If there was one thing that you'd recommend outside of the audits, what could a project do, like let's say today, to start working on to protect themselves a little bit more?
Oh, two things. Like I said earlier, is use working code that has been edited hundreds of times and has had thousands of eyes on it. And if you write brand new code or and you would wire up these
I'm sorry, you're cut. I don't know if it's just me, but you're cutting out. Hold up, 1 second. uh, is that just me or
testing.
okay? You sound
Am I
good
still
now.
cutting out? Okay.
No, not right now. Would you mind re-explaining that? Sorry, I did not understand half of what you'd said on the second half of that.
Yeah. So there's two main ways uh, that protocols can help write secure code and make sure that their protocol is safe. And the first one is smart contract libraries. So these are cookie cutter code that's been, had hundreds of audits, have had tens of thousands of eyes on it. So you can be relatively certain that any vulnerabilities would have been found. It's not a guarantee, but there's more of a chance. And then if you do have to write new code, or even after you've done the wiring of all these different libraries to create your functionality, it's always best to have people that have done this before that know security that you can talk to, or even contractors that come in that specialize in this to just really do a deep dive in and work with you on ways maybe you can restructure things or vulnerabilities that could possibly exist. Don't try to do it all yourself.
Yeah. Okay, that's definitely a good piece, no matter what you're doing as well. A lot of these are very applicable, regardless of what what niche you're in, I guess, whether it be development or something completely different. But yeah, taking advice from those with a lot more experience is definitely a important aspect of whether uh security is going to work as intended or not.
Yeah, you can't be good at everything, and security is hard.
Definitely.
It's the number one rule.
There's always somebody trying to break it down. That's for sure. Um,
It's
you're cutting out again. Hello, hello.
okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Do you
Yeah,
mind?
and the numbers, the number zero rule of security is nothing is secure. So you're also battling up against that. So
Mm-hmm.
everything you do is to make more certain of security, but at the end of the day, you can never guarantee security, and that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some very interesting stuff on that actually. It's really intriguing looking into uh the 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 development of technology as a whole. And from what I've seen, like I've seen some articles written on security, and like as new technology is created, you have a huge amount of a push. Like, all right, this is a extremely secure, and then the level of hacking just far exceeds that for some time, and then security has to kind of rush to catch back up to that. Um, and it's kind of interesting looking at that. It's like an ever evolving um malicious, hack versus this ever evolving security trying to adapt, as it continues to be attacked in new ways.
Yeah, it's a cat and mouse game.
Definitely.
There's never going to be an end.
Definitely. So for developers that have, a certain level of experience, what would in while writing their smart contract or while bridging or that kind of thing, what can they really do to help improve their ability to safeguard their projects? Because obviously they're never going to get that net zero on the threats in security, but what can they do, or does that just go back into the audits and getting other people to look into the contract itself?
I would say the audits and getting other people to look into the contracts, that's what you should always do, no matter your level at the
Mm-hmm.
end or even during development.
Mm-hmm.
But as a developer to grow, you really have to train yourself. So you have to research different types of hacks that have happened. When they happen, read the after action reports, look at the code, try to figure it out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Always try to be thinking in that mindset so that you can use the attacker's mindset while you're developing to help you write more resilient code. And it's an evolution. It's a training. So you have to be passionate about it, and you have to actually put in the time and the dedication and the work to learn it.
Gotcha. So you're learning, you're having to learn, you're being forced to learn multiple different things, not just how to do something great, but also how to protect that thing.
Absolutely. And there's so much that you need to know in order to know how to protect. And
Mm-hmm.
it's quite literally impossible to know everything and every level. So everybody can grow and learn more.
Mm-hmm.
It's a never ending process.
Um, would you mind kind of going into three of the maybe biggest types of or most common types of hacks for a user base, not necessarily project focused, but for users, and how to do our best to mitigate any risk associated with them?
So a lot that I see are these spam messages that come over Discord a lot, or even on Twitter, where it's a help scam where they say, "Oh, you're having problems. We can help you out there," and they redirect you to sites to get you to enter in either your seed phrase or other personal information, and they make the site look legit. So you may even believe that you're inside your wallet, but you're not. Um, so so it's really easy for somebody to try to social engineer you because you're open to all these messages and signaling. So don't click on any links from anybody you don't know, and even if you know them, think about how well do you know them. Never enter in your personal information, seed phrase. That's basic. Um, but I think that's one of the most common ways for people to get attacked is
Mm-hmm.
actually losing their seed phrase. Another is downloading applications. So there's some word free VPN applications. So people might be trying to get around some crypto legislation and restrictions by using different
Mm,
jurisdictions. And they might look up for free VPN to save a couple dollars. So they'll download a fake VPN. It'll work. They'll think everything's working, but you just put a backdoor in your computer and allow the attacker to steal all of your funds uh, and anything else you had on your system, bank accounts, whatever.
mm-hmm,
Um, outside of that, it's really more on the protocol layer and the infrastructure layer. So the protocol itself, and also your RPCs. Make sure you're using valid RPCs. But again, the RPCs on an infrastructure level could be hacked as well, like we've seen with Phantom, and I believe it was Polygon. Somebody
mm-hmm.
gained access to their RPC endpoints and swapped them out.
Yes, yes. That was very unfortunate, for people. Um, and that's very interesting. There's something I've seen a couple times here and there, which I did some research into it to try and, obviously just protect myself and bring it up to some of the community members. But I saw this thing where it wasn't even asking for a seed phrase, but rather it was asking for just your MetaMask password. So it popped up as almost like your MetaMask just login, right? So just on like the corner of my browser. And then I was like, it was interesting because I wasn't opening anything, so I started doing research because of that. Because I was like, okay, this is a little bit weird, right? For that just to pop up. Um, and I saw that apparently there's some different. There's a little bit. What am I trying to say? There's some hacks that kind of go for your MetaMask password itself, and then through some kind of virtualization, if people have that enabled, or if you allow any kind of other computers to connect with your PC, they can actually see your screen as you're typing in, whether it be your password for MetaMask, or even if they're taking virtual control over your PC and then typing the password that they have and then actually getting your seed phrase through MetaMask, which was kind of interesting. I don't really understand how the back end of that all works, but I heard of some hacks like that. Have you seen anything of the sort? Did I explain that well enough? I know that they may
Yeah,
come
yeah,
off.
yeah. So,
Okay.
so I have seen the same thing, and that was more when I mean there could be many different
Mm-hmm.
this, but the one that I seen was when there were some exploits in the Chrome browser themselves. So they were basically fishing out these links to a lot of people that had vulnerable versions in their browser that
Mm-hmm.
didn't update in time, and what that would allow them to do is basically steal data from the browser database, which would include your crypto keys, but they would still be encrypted when they grabbed them. So they would still need your password in order to access that information. So when you don't enter your MetaMask password, if somebody steals all the data on your computer, you're relatively safe.
Mm-hmm.
um, they still need that password in order to decrypt that data to get your actual raw keys.
Mm-hmm. So if someone was put in that position, um, let's say let's say someone was put in a position where either they, you know, fell for some kind of situation like that, where they gave their seed phrase, gave their password out, would the only option, or would the safest bet just to be to transfer all funds immediately to a separate wallet? Is there any residual effect that it could have on your PC at all? Like, I'm really just trying to go through covering all the bases of if you were to make a mistake like that. Let's say you realized it right after. What would kind of that next step be?
Well, if your wallet gets compromised, just assume that everything is
Mm-hmm.
compromised. That's a very safe assumption. Valid or not, you should act that way. So you should absolutely reformat your drives. Just consider your computer done. You should, yes, also try to transfer out all of the funds. That wallet's now dead. A lot of times hackers will already have these automated scripts to drain all of your funds. So if you're lucky enough to get to them before they drain everything, count your blessings. But as soon as any funds go in it, let's say, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they're probably still watching and they'll suck it out as soon as you deposit anything or withdraw anything.
Hmm.
So it's very smart to start with security because it's very hard to recover at the end. But then also with your personal funds, you have different types of wallets. So you have your MetaMask wallet, you have hardware wallets, which I would recommend for everybody. But then you also have cold wallets. And these are wallets that you generate offline and you keep the seed phrase, well, not the seed phrase, but you keep the key on paper. So it's never exposed online, and you use that as a deep savings account. So anything that you're not trading with or you don't need to be liquid, you should be putting into a cold wallet. And it's very hard to hack paper. So I mean, make sure you keep it safe. But that's if you have a large amount of tokens that you know you're just going to hold, put them in cold storage and forget about it. You don't need to worry then.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an important piece, and I hope that everyone here is, at least if you haven't yet, thinking about getting, so even something simple like a ledger is, it provides a lot of extra security that makes a lot of these hacks near impossible to work the way it's intended.
Well, you
Um,
should drop the affiliate link.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll do that. But yeah, so I would definitely look into getting something like a ledger. Just, and I only recommend them because they're one of the more reputable brands, and for the price, they're actually very solid. I get a little myself. I get a little bit sketched out going to anything other than brand names for things like security. Um,
That's also another good point that I think it's important to mention. Do not buy any hardware wallet secondhand or even on eBay or whatever marketplace. Always get them directly from the original manufacturer off of their original site. Um, it is so easy for an attacker to either get a valid one or make a fake one that basically allows them to steal all of your funds as soon as you use it. So always get one straight from the manufacturer. Don't try to save any money getting one secondhand.
100%, 100%. And I don't know how you feel about this, but even on Amazon, like, because you have independent sellers that can sell on there, I'm always extremely cautious when it comes to uh, se- security.
I would not use Amazon, correct?
Hmm. Yeah, at least not for something like this. Yeah,
You
100%.
could even envision some supply chain hack. So
Yeah.
you have to trust somebody, trust the company. You don't need to add
Hmm.
middlemen.
Yes, 100%. And kind of branching from this, I think that was like a big chunk of what I had for today. Was there anything really that you really wanted to dig into, more specific to print or financial? I know we touched up a little bit on it, but on how you're using your kind of knowledge and security, and everything that you're really focusing on prioritizing. Um, is there anything that you really want to touch up on there?
I think we talked about a lot. We hit the major points. I think we talked a lot about how it applies to printer. So yeah, I mean, just me when I develop in general, I always try to think simple as possible, and everything is insecure. So limit things first, and then only open up what you have. So there's always this trade-off of security and convenience as well. The most secure computer system is one that's not connected to the internet. It's not very
Hmm.
convenient if you want to check your email. So
Hmm.
there's always a trade-off, and that's what I try to do when I develop.
Hmm.
On printer as well, on the TBAS. I just try to develop with a security first mindset because adding security retroactively is infinitely harder. I would even say most likely impossible.
Hmm.
And yeah,
100%. 100%. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to post them in the AMA questions chat. I don't think we have too much. I honestly really appreciate you for coming on, and I know a lot of this is so far out of my skill, but you're able to dumb it down for someone like me to understand. So I hope other people could kind of get the gist of at least what was going on with a lot of these security issues that projects have been having. And I think that things are definitely going to eventually, we'll start to see at least a more positive trend for the general user experience, because right now it is there's almost no security anywhere, which is it makes things extremely difficult. I mean, especially on some, when all these communities are going through either Telegram or Discord, the number of bots spamming different things in there are ridiculously um it's way too common. I think we'll see that start to shift a little bit as more and more people enter the space and more security starts to be applied. But um, very interesting thoughts, and I really appreciate you letting me pick your brain a little bit on everything else that you kind of are bringing to Print Financial and to just the security aspect in general.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. I'm glad to have my brain picked anytime. Yeah, very much enjoyed it.
Awesome. I don't know. Oh, I do have a question from Cletosaurus. He said, "Why is mint and burn better? What about Printer Financial with the mint and burn aspect make that better than holding liquidity?"
It's one of the main ways that we got rid of holding all of the liquidity
Hmm.
as wrapped tokens, so that every project can be responsible for the way that they want to do their bridging, and not have to rely on this universal pool that's out there, hanging like a gold bar in the streets waiting to be taken.
Hmm.
So we use that to basically remove some attack vectors, but also allows us to distribute that out to the projects themselves.
Hmm. Gotcha. And I guess one more question, kind of branching off of that. With the mint and burn, do you guys ever run into any issues as far as that goes? Because I assumed there was a reason that people use liquidity for bridges, or do you think that that's just an outdated way of doing it?
Well, originally that was the only way you could say and still could bridge Ethereum. Nobody has permissions to mint
Mm-hmm.
Ethereum. But with this project, we're not trying to mint native tokens.
Hmm.
We're trying to enable project tokens to be native bridgeable. So it's a different. It's going at it from a different direction from the start.
Interesting. Okay, gotcha. I think a lot of the development understanding, like I've said, is a little bit outside my scope. So, um, definitely interesting to kind of hear it from from someone trying to explain it in the way I understand. But
Yeah, I hope I was successful. So
yes, I think a lot of things were cleared up. If I was to ask like one more thing on the bridging, I mean, I'm sure that there could be like thousands of hours of discussion because it would just take that many times for me to finally 100% get it. But I think I have a pretty good idea of how printers actually um doing these things now, and I think that's extremely important for people to realize the services they're using and what they're actually bringing, what benefits insecurity some a project like printers bring, and how that actually works before you start using all these other things. um
yeah,
but
for
yeah,
sure. You were the only one responsible for your funds. This
yes,
is
100%.
DeFi.
100%. Um, and I really appreciate you for coming on one more time. And I hope you guys had a great time the past hour. Remember, we do have our event in about an hour now at 3 o'clock. We'll be starting off with $1,000 in giveaway prizes. We're gonna be having 4 rounds. I saw a couple people asking. Each will be $250. So be sure to tune in. It's just gonna be a load of fun. We're just gonna be hanging out, having a good time. But Alice, I really appreciate you for coming on, and I'm sure we'll have some more talks like this again in the future as development continues with both security and with hacks.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to the next time.
Awesome. Have a good one. I'll catch y'all later.
Yep, you too. Bye bye.